What's up, Dallas? It's your girl Rachel. We have another fabulous guest on my show today. Pastor Henry, how are you today?
Good evening, Rachel. It's such an honor to be on your podcast. And hello, everybody. I'm fascinated about what you're doing and excited about the opportunity. So let's see where it goes.
Absolutely. So, for our audience out there, just to let them know, you have a podcast called Vantage Point. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your podcast and how you got started with that?
Well, I started with my podcast basically for spiritual purposes, but it's gradually, should I say, diversifying into other areas. Um, I'm a Christian, I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for almost 29 years, going on 30, officially ordained about 35 years ago. And one of the things that impressed me from beginning was just seeing things from a perspective that catches all the other perspective. And that was the foundation of my call as a prophetic person into ministry, to see things from a view that catches all the other dimensions. Um, the best we can see, is two-dimensional. You can't see into a third dimension with our bare natural eyes. You can see something and see a little bit of the other side. To catch a third dimension, you either have to be 30 foot away from it, or you have to have eyes that can bend. So forgive me, I'm a little bit of a storyteller. So I'll tell you two quick stories. There's a movie called Wanted. I think it has um, Angelina Jolie.
Mm.
And the long and short of the story is that there's this boy. He's the son of one of the best assassins there's ever been, and he doesn't know it. He's like walking in a store. Some of you have seen the movie, but um, one of the first things they teach him when they tell him he has the pedigree, he has the genes to be the best assassin on earth, is they teach him how to slow down his blood flow, and he sees things in slow motion. So he can see the flapping of the wings of a fly. And so
Mhm.
he shot a fly and cut off the wings the first time he realized that. And then the second thing they taught him was how to shoot, and the bullet will curve or go around an obstacle. So that's three-dimensional abilities, and I'm just using a story to kind of highlight that. That's three-dimensional ability. And so Vantage Point is seeing things with that extra dimension, being able to see that extra dimension, being able to see beyond the obstacles, the natural obstacles that are in our path. And that's where I come from. Maybe I'll give you one more story. In the book of Numbers, um, there was a king who saw Israel, the Israelites, while they were moving, and he looked at them and said, "These people are getting bigger and bigger, and it's like they're going to be a threat wherever they go. So I'm going to call a prophet and ask the prophet to curse them." And so he called a prophet and took the prophet and said, "Hey, I want you to curse these people for me." And the prophet said, "Who?" He said, "The people of Israel." He said, "I can't curse who God has blessed." But before he said that, he took him up a mountain and showed him so that he could have the full view of the beginning and the end of the camp. That's a vantage point. So seeing the beginning and the end, and which is one of the names of God in Revelation chapter 1, verse 8, verse 20 as well, that he is the first and the last, the beginning and the ending, he who was, who is, and is to come. He is all of that because he sits at a vantage point. He also says that in Psalm 20, where he says God sits in heaven and he laughs at scorn. In Psalm 12, he said the same thing. In Psalm 2, he says it again. So that's what Vantage Point tries to do. We try to go and look at things from God's perspective to catch that extra dimension that we don't catch. Sometimes it's hidden, sometimes it's obscure, sometimes it's supernatural, it's mystified. Any which way, we just try to catch it. That's what Vantage Point tries to do. Sorry, I tell a lot of stories, so I hope that makes my point
That's
clear.
okay. No, that's okay. I am perfectly okay with that because I like guests that actually interact and talk. So that's amazing. That is very profound what you were saying about seeing life from a vantage point. to navigate it and to understand it in a way that people don't normally see it. I think that is actually really, really insightful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you as a pastor have always you have your own testimony. So before you were Pastor Henry, how did you come to know Jesus Christ?
I gave my life to Christ. I was a little boy. I was about 10 years old. Don't ask me how old I am, please. I'm kidding. But I was about 10 years old, and I was in high school. And my parents didn't know much about this, but when I gave my life, after I gave my life to Christ, they got to know the story. I love dancing, and back then, it was break dancing that was the in thing. So I was always break dancing, and the break dancing styles were floor, what you call floor business, king tots, and the normal break dance. Floor business is what you do on the ground, all those helicopter spins, head spins, shoulder spins, and the crocodile or even the snake or snail moves. All of those things were what you call the floor business. So I loved all of those then, and always loved competing. I made extra money. Imagine way back in the 80s making any money in the 80s as a little boy, 10. Um, felt like big money. And there was this major competition. I had always come second or third, depending on who was competing. So there were these two guys that were so good. They were always better than I was, especially within certain circles. So that day I decided I was going to pray. It was a Friday. It was a Wednesday. I beg your pardon. The competition was a Friday night. So I went to the school fellowship, the student fellowship, to pray and ask God. First time I ever did that, I call it I made a stupid mistake, So I went to go ask God. had I had the Michael Jackson jacket on. I had the white gloves, from off the wall Michael Jackson. Then so
Right.
we used to wear white gloves. I was copying him then as a 10-year-old. Would you believe that? And I had um, one of my favorite groups then was Shalama. Um, and they had the best dancer. One of the world best dancers then was Jeffrey Daniels, who was one of the I don't know if you remember Shalama. I've got friends. Da, 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 da. That's
Yeah,
one of
yeah,
their
I
old
do.
song. So he had his hair shaved and only this. So I had just this, like
Mhm.
Mr. T's, but mine was curled and it was from the front to the back. I have a little bit of a bald now, but then I had full hair. And so that's how I showed up, showed up in the student this thing, and everyone was like, Harry, is it John Harry? Is that it? And I was known as a bad boy. Um, so they sang. After singing, the man went up and introduced himself and said, "Let us pray." And I just fell down, collapsed, and I didn't get up until after 2 hours. Within those 2 hours, I saw the Lord in a vision, and he was beautiful. He was glorious. He was just majestic, and I wanted to touch anything on his body. I wanted to touch the hem of his garment. I wanted to touch his feet. I wanted to hug. If anything he would let me do, I was just running, yearning, but he kept on moving further away, and I started begging. I started crying and said, "Please let me touch you." And then he appeared on a cross and he was bloodied, wounds everywhere, bleeding from the top of his head to the crown of his feet. And I was heartbroken. And he looked me in the eyes and said to me, "I did this for you, and I want you to understand that." And I knelt down at the cross there and cried. I said, "I understand it. I understand it. I'll never let you down. What do you want me to do? Take my life." I just, confess. And that was it. That all happened within the 2 hours I was unconscious on the ground. And after that, I woke up, changed man. I cried from Wednesday, September 23rd, 1980, from that Wednesday to Friday 25th, which was the day of the competition. It became a medical situation because I was just crying. And they didn't know I had that much tears. They took me to the school clinic. I called my parents. My parents said, "He's going to be okay. Leave him in school. We don't want to come and pick him. We have plans for the weekend." But I was just crying, and nobody knew what happened to me. And then they finally decided to take me to one of the teachers in the school who was a born again Christian. So we
Mhm.
got to his house. His name was Brother Patrick. We got to his house and he was frying eggs. I remember that night, Friday night around 9:20, because we had to stay after the fellowship. We got to his house. He was frying eggs And he said, give me a minute, I'll join you guys. So we were sitting in his living room, and I just collapsed and started praying in the Holy Ghost. And everybody that was with me, about six other people, all fell on the ground too and started crying and praying in the Holy Ghost. A kind of mini revival broke out, and he came back into the living room, and he too fell down and started praying. And so for the next 2 hours, everybody, including the host, were all on the ground crying and praying. And that's how he said, the hand of God must be on you, Henry. And he took me to a church, and the pastor had been sent to tell the church that God was about to do something, and there was a leader who was coming, and he would use him. So it coincided. I was coming in on the day that man was bringing that prophetic word, and that's how I got called into ministry, and haven't looked back since then.
Wow, that's amazing. Like it started when you were 10. So that's fantastic. There's a lot of people that don't even recognize or see Christ until they're in their like adulthood. So
Yeah.
for navigating life as a 10-year-old in the faith and walking in your purpose, how have you been able to stay on that straight and narrow?
That's a big question. I, I'll be frank with you. I don't remember too much struggles,
Mhm.
from when I was a little boy. It was so easy. I mean, I'm suffering now as a Christian compared to what I don't remember too many struggles then. It was so easy. Um, I think one of the reasons why it was easy was that we just plunged ourselves. I like to, let me say it that way, but let me put it the other way. I plunged myself into praying.
Mhm.
And I am forever grateful to God that that was the path He picked from. Other people would have found other paths, other things, but I just found myself within the circle of, let me put it this way, intercessors, prayer warriors.
Mhm.
And I just learned how to pray, So even one day after I became a Christian, we were already talking about spending an hour, 2 hours praying, So, and then I had read the Bible uh, before Christmas that year. So from September 23rd to December 25th, I had read all of the Bible, Genesis to Revelations. And and so that was it. I remember one or two hiccups on my path then, one or two addictions that I had as a little boy that I couldn't shake up. I loved Dennis Robbins. She's a novelist. If you know Dennis Robbins, and those she died years ago. And I loved Hadley Chase novels.
Mhm.
So I remember a few titles then, but I had a collection. I had a library of James Hadley Chase novels, and my father would always travel to come to US, and he knew that the best gift to get me was a James Hadley Chase novel or a Dennis Robbins novels way back then.
Mhm.
So that was probably one of the last things I struggled with leaving James Hadley Chase. Um,
Mhm.
and Dennis Robbins. There was another, I forgot her name, but she wrote mostly romantic novels. I remember the name. Um, this became addictions that God had to deliver me from.
Mhm.
Ultimately, I remember those struggles. I remember hiding James Hadley Chase novels in my closet. When I went to school. Especially the ones I hadn't read or wanted to read while I was still in school. I remember
Mhm.
that, but I think that was my only struggle. But God helped me because I grew up just in the midst of people who were serious with God. I
Mhm.
was always the youngest in the group. I was always the baby in the group. I grew up in the midst of ministers, and not just ministers. I grew up in the midst of people. Like one of the biggest testimonies I had within the first week of being born again was a friend, or not a friend, like a mentor, came back from South Korea the week I gave
Mhm.
my life to Christ. And when he came back and heard that I had been born again, we weren't friends, but the people I began hanging out with, he was one of them, but he wasn't in town. And I met him when he came back. And he said he had gone to South Korea. This was way back in 1980. Can you believe it? And all he had gone to South Korea to do was to spend 2 weeks to pray. If anybody knows South Korea, you know the prayer mountain in Seoul. And so he left that in my spirit, and it took me about 17 years before I was able to visit South Korea and pray on the prayer mountains, and visit Yoido Church just to see, because we grew up hearing testimonies from such places. So that was my growing up. Yeah.
Mhm. And I love that too. And there was something very profound that you said, as well as being surrounded by people who were serious about God. Um, I don't think a lot of people really take God serious, although they should. But the importance, I want to put more of an emphasis of surrounding yourself with people that, trust God, like they walk with God. They help you through you walking with God as well. Like, can you tell our viewers why it's important to surround yourself with the community of God's people?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, there are there are five. How do I put it? There are five people that are around you. You don't
Mhm.
have control over two of them, but you have control over three. And the
Mhm.
three that you have control over, you need to be very, very intentional about who they are, what their goals in life are, the caliber of their personalities. Because I wish we're gonna go down rabbit holes. I don't know whether we can finish it up. Because what happens is, let me tell you two very important things. Number one, you know, there's a lot of intersections here. Excuse me, and that's why I'm kind of pausing to talk about it. But let me back up a bit and tell us something. You know, it's easy to say people can't curse you, and yeah, people can't curse you, but people who have a measure of authority over you can influence you. People who have a measure of authority over you can curse you. That is why when a mother says it won't be well with you, you're a stupid, it's not just abusive, it's a semi-curse that you need to be very watchful of and undo. But the people who are closest to you don't need to speak to influence your life.
Mhm. That
They
is very
don't
true.
need to speak to influence your life. Their
Mhm.
character, their habits. Okay, let me go a little further. Even their secret sins rub off on you. If you don't guard yourself properly, you get influenced by not just the things you know they do, but even the ones you don't know that they do. You got to be
Mhm.
very careful. I'll give you a good example. Um, we traveled, I was in Belize a few months ago, and one of us, I didn't know he was having cigarette problems. He was
Mhm.
still smoking, and he was one of the people that we picked to travel to go help us do some things in Belize. Um, so something happened, and one of the helpers came and took all our clothing and went to wash. And he had gone out and hiddenly smoked, and he hid the remaining pack of cigarette in that. And then he folded it and put it away. And then when I came, I was trying to change from um, my sleeping wear into something, and everything was gone. Somebody had come to take it to wash it, and I was told that was what happened. So I started looking for something to wear because there were people waiting for me to counsel them. And then I found his, and he's slightly bigger than I am, but I decided it's better that than the wife beater t-shirt, that just sleeveless. I wanted to be presentable, so I wore those. As I was wearing them, I smelled cigarette, but my mind did not go to him, and then we finished talking. So while we were praying, the lady, was acting, what you would call manifesting. And she grabbed me before the help came to help me. She grabbed me and grabbed the pocket. And inside the inner pocket was where the guy had hidden the pack of cigarette. And so when she
Oh.
grabbed it, she was holding and pulling. And then I could feel she was holding something, you understand? And this is the big lesson. So when they finally freed her, I decided to take a look at what she was grabbing before continuing the ministration. And I made, forgive me, a stupid mistake. I put my hands without looking, pulled it all out, and it was all a pack of cigarette rumpled and stubs breaking off. The tobacco inside falling off. Her husband, herself, she actually woke up from her deliverance.
Oh
the secret,
my.
the secret jacked her out, and so they first all looked at me. Is it okay to smoke? You smoke? You're doing deliverance as a smoker? It was 1,001 questions I was imagining they were asking me.
Mhm.
And then I looked at it. And then I turned to my helper. I said, whose is this? Right in front of them. I don't know how that happened. Whose is this? He pulled me aside and he, whispered to me. So that's how they knew it wasn't mine, but that saved me. But then ultimately, and you won't believe it, it paused that deliverance for 6, 7 hours. Had to say,
Mm.
come back and all of that. We had to get a group of people praying, asking God for mercy, seeing if we could just, okay, as we were saying, it was difficult to get back to that point, but the hidden sin of somebody interrupted my spiritual work. And when I prayed about it, this was exactly how God painted it to me, that the things you don't see about the people who are closest to you. Of course, we now had to sit down and deal with the private life of another friend, but that can rub off on you. So be careful. You need to choose people. And this, I wrote a book titled um, Exposure is Coming. And in that book, I asked a few questions. I said, by the time it gets to exposure, and I was writing about the phenomenon of social media exposing of all these men of God, you hear this and that and this, and I said there was a lot of people falling between last year and this year, a lot of Christians, top leaders. We just heard news. This person has been molesting girls for 20 years. This person has been sleeping with, this person has had ungodly relationship with church members and stuff like that. So and I was in the midst of some of the top 5 servants of God in Canada. And we were sitting down on a table, and that hasn't happened a lot, but I paused and said, God, and I was the youngest. I said, by the time I get to their age, God, I want to have friends who will call me on the phone one day and say, God showed me this.
Mhm.
Why hasn't any of your friends called and said, God told me you're struggling with this addiction? Why can we get all kinds of prophecies, but we never get prophecies that can set you free from the sin that will make you a front page story on, page 6?
Mhm.
Why isn't that going? Well, I said, God, anybody that is in my inner circle, please speak to me before they fall. Please, Lord.
Mhm.
That's what it is to be truly a brother. So, like I said, this is a rabbit hole that there's just so many intersections of it that we can go down, but it just speaks a lot that you need to be very, very intentional about the people you bring close to you.
Mhm.
I belong to groups of people who, um, if you miss 2, 3 days of prayer, you know, somebody will just jokingly hold your hand, hey, come pray with me, and just consciously go praying for 1 hour. Say, are you okay? You have people pulling you at that level, who can. So like the image in my background is a mountain. And one of the reasons I put that image is because I've been to that real life mountain in Colombia, and when you're climbing up it, um, they call it the mountain of unity, the mountain of help. It's the kind of mountain that even though if you have all the harnesses, you have to help one another and you have to count yourselves. So if I go get a good spot, hook myself, I have to help somebody who is going to help somebody. And you have to know how many of you, because sometimes it goes around the bend.
Oh,
That's
wow.
what it is to belong to a group. Belong to a group of people that will wake up on Tuesday morning and text you, hey, this is what God said. I don't know how it meets you, but that's what God said to me while I was praying last night. And somebody that will call you on the phone and say, hey, I saw this. It looks like a 5-year thing, but praying to it
Mhm.
right now. You know, um, Jesus knew what Judas would do, and Jesus knew what Peter would do. He told Peter, he said, I've prayed for you. And he told him,
Mhm.
when you're strong, pray for your brothers and your sisters. So choose your people wisely, because your journey, it affects your journey. It will affect how far you go. It will affect the easiness of that trip. It would affect the direction of it. Those are the 3 things. It would affect, how far you go. It will affect the direction of your journey, affect how far you go, and affect what you feel, what you experience in that journey. So be very conscious, be very intentional, be very wise about the people you allow into your circle. They say, I've forgotten that saying, but it's something. Go to the mist, talk, go to the midst of wise men. The discussion is better there, or something like that. I've forgotten. There's a proverb that says something like that. Um,
Mhm.
but even among Christians, I'm very, very conscious who I hang out around. I hang out around Christians who make covenants to be better every day than the previous day. I hang out around Christians who we've sworn to take care of one another, who've sworn to watch over one another. We have the standards we set for ourselves, our standards we set for one another, and um, when we say I prayed for you last night, it's most likely
Mhm.
10 to 20 minutes of just praying for you with your name in front, nothing else. 10 to 20 minutes. That's and you see, yeah, that's a lot of commitment to one another, and in many other areas too. We have to be challenging one another.
I agree. Our pastor here, he speaks a lot about, having your circle around you and to guard your circle because, what you let in will eventually change what you start to think. So if you surround yourself with people with bad habits, eventually that world is going to grab you and it's going to start making you feel numb to what God has for you. So it's important to have that community of believers to uplift you, to keep you from straying from God's purpose. And, I'm thankful for that. Thank you for your emphasis on that, by the way. That's a very, very great explanation for, being very cautious about who you have in your circle. I just love that. I really do. I am learning to walk and trust God more and more every single day of my life. Like whenever I met you, Pastor Henry, and your personal assistant, she is super, super sweet on email. Reaching out to make sure this happened. But if somebody wanted to connect with you, how could they find you?
On social media, I'm Henry Wanery. Last name is Nwaneri, Henry. So Instagram, social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, those four, you'll find me as Henry Wanery. Um, I've written some books. You can find them at booksbypastorhenry.com. Books by Pastor Henry. So www.booksbypastorhenry.com. Um, I think those are the most straightforward ways to get a hold of me. And
Mhm.
so for your audience, um, the first five, if any first five of your audience reaches out to me and say, hey, I was with Rachel, I listened to Rachel when you talked about this. I have just published a book. I'll send you, and if I'll give you access to the free e-copy of it on Amazon. And this is the book. I wanted to bless your audience. It's called Procrastination. Sorry, I know I have a background, so that it's called Procrastination, Breaking Yourself Free from Every Spirit of Delay. It just came out 2 days ago, and it has like a worksheet inside that can help you break industry. So just tell me, I was with Rachel, I listened to Rachel, and you said I'll get a free copy. I'll give as many as 5 or 10 people who say, hey, Henry, I came from Rachel, and I'll give you a free Amazon e-copy of the book. I hope that blesses your audience.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And for our audience, y'all heard that. So make sure you reach out. But I do want to talk about your book a minute because it's procrastination is something that a lot of people deal with and they don't understand that it's a form of disobedience. Um,
Mm-hmm.
especially when God has called you to do something. Can you emphasize a little bit about procrastination and why we need to be obedient?
There are two types of procrastinations. There's the micro and then there's the macro. The micro, everybody procrastinates. Everybody, even Jesus procrastinated. When they told him Lazarus was sick, he waited 2 days, even though his own was divine. But The problem with micro and macro procrastination is when we think it's divine and we allow it to become a character or a habit. So one of the things I do in my book is to highlight when it goes from divine to habitual. And you need to be, because once it goes from divine to habitual, it automatically crosses the invisible line of disobedience. It becomes irresponsibility, disorganization, disobedience, and rebellion ultimately. It becomes rebellion ultimately. And the worst things that you can do for yourself is to have an excuse for your disobedience, to have an excuse for your, I mean, like a congent excuse, like, I don't feel led yet, or that kind of a thing. That's one of the biggest excuses people have for not doing things. And some people say, I like working under pressure, I like waiting until it all comes to me, whatever your excuse is. Once you have a solid excuse for your procrastination, you get into trouble. And the biggest trouble you get into is the trouble of constantly procrastinating what you should be doing now. Hear me. When you procrastinate what you should be doing, you limit your timetable. You limit your growth, your natural growth tendencies. You limit what God can do with you. God says he's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all you can imagine. It is your timetable that God works with. And so God can watch you procrastinate your own schedule. And it's not disobedience. It's you. You're comfortable. It's your safe space, but he's working with you. And so a lot of us can be 60 years. That's why they say, have you heard this story? They say most billionaires become billionaires after the age of. That's why it's abnormal to be 30 plus and be a billionaire, but it's 60, 70, and they tell you, oh, I worked in McDonald's, I did this, I did this, I did this. That's your own schedule, your own timetable. Now there's a little bit of procrastination there. But when it is God's will, I'll give you a good example. That's why Jesus knew he had to be done by 33. He had to be. At 12, he told his mother something. You find that story in Luke chapter 2. He said, didn't you know that I was supposed to be about my father's business? He knew his schedule. His schedule at 12 meant he could be bar mitzvah. It's a schedule for children when they are called into adulthood as a boy in Israel. But the God schedule for him at that time was a different calendar altogether. And according to his own schedule, he should have apologized to his mother. But according to the schedule of God, he asked his mother, didn't you know that I was supposed to be about my mother's schedule? So wake up to what God has for you. Wake up to what God wants to do with you, because that's where you are disobeying God. You have a right to graduate at 80. You have a right to go back to college at 90, but you don't have a right to disobey God's timetable for your life.
Thank you so much. Like I'm very passionate about that topic, because when God gives you something for you to do, it's for you to do, not for someone else to do. And I've talked about that on my podcast before, not great in detail, but I've talked about it to where, people understand that whenever God gives you something, it's for you to do. It's not for someone else to do. And it's for you to finish. And you do have to finish it. You do have to go do what God tells you to do, because that is a mission. It is our purpose to obey God, even if it seems impossible. But all things can be done through Christ. All things. So I just wanted to encourage everyone. I just want to thank you, Pastor Henry, for being on my show. I feel like, your podcast is definitely one where people really need to listen, especially for some inspiration and insight about what God has in their lives. So for our viewers, please go follow the Vantage Point with Pastor Henry. You're on all podcast platforms or just YouTube? All of them?
All of them. Yeah, sorry about that. I had muted myself. All of them.
That's awesome. And how often do your episodes come out?
Every week, once a week.
All right. All right. Everybody, please go follow Vantage Point with Pastor Henry. He's got some amazing things to talk about. Also, go follow What's Up Dallas, where we're bringing all positive things here to you, to the community, and now nationwide. We'll be back with another episode. Bye.